The wind carried whispers before it carried her. For 3 days, Clara Whitmore had traveled across the endless frontier, sitting inside a worn wooden wagon that creaked with every turn of the wheels. The open land stretched in every direction, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Golden grass moved like waves beneath the afternoon sun, but Clara could not admire the view. Her hands remained folded tightly in her lap, her fingers trembling beneath the fabric of her plain traveling dress. Everyone had warned her about the man waiting at the end of this journey. They called him the Shadow of the Canyon. They said he was the most feared Apache warrior in the entire territory. A man who had defeated stronger enemies, a man whose name alone made armed men think twice before crossing his path. Some claimed he had no heart. Others said he was more dangerous because he rarely showed emotion. And now, she was being sent to become his wife. Clara looked down at the small piece of paper in her hand, the marriage agreement her uncle had signed without her permission. Her own family had decided her future. After her father's death, the Whitmore farm fell into debt. Her uncle, who had taken control of everything, saw Clara as nothing more than a burden. When an arrangement came from a powerful Apache warrior offering protection and resources in exchange for marriage, her uncle accepted immediately. No one asked Clara what she wanted. No one cared that she was afraid. You should consider yourself lucky, her uncle had told her before she left. A man like him could have taken anything he wanted. At least he made an agreement. Those words haunted her. Because Clara knew what people said about powerful men. Agreements could be broken. Promises could disappear. As the wagon finally approached the Apache settlement, her heartbeat grew louder. She expected to see a cruel camp filled with violence and anger. Instead, she saw something she never imagined. Children laughing near the river. Women preparing food together. Men working peacefully around the camp. It was not the place she had been warned about. But then she saw him. Standing near the edge of the trees was the man everyone feared. The Apache warrior. He was tall and powerful, with long black hair falling over his shoulders and a calm, intimidating presence. His face showed years of hardship, but his eyes were different from the stories. They were not filled with cruelty. They were filled with exhaustion. The wagon stopped. Clara's breath caught. The warrior stepped forward slowly, and every instinct told her to move away. She expected him to claim her immediately, to treat her like property. But he stopped several feet away. "You are Clara Whitmore?" he asked. His voice was deep but controlled. She nodded. "I am." A long silence followed. Then he surprised her. "You look afraid." Clara almost laughed at the obvious truth. "I have heard many things about you." The warrior's expression did not change. "I know. They say you are dangerous." A shadow crossed his face. People often fear what they do not understand. Clara held his gaze, trying to find the monster everyone described. She could not. The warrior looked toward the camp, then back at her. "This marriage was arranged," he said. "Not chosen." Her eyes widened slightly. She had not expected him to admit that. "I did not ask for this either," he continued. "But since you are here, you will be treated with respect." Clara remained silent. Then came the words she never expected. "No one will force you to do anything." The sentence felt impossible. All her life, people had decided things for her. Her uncle decided her future. The agreement decided her marriage. The rumors decided who this man was. But standing in front of her was a warrior everyone called a savage, offering her something no one else had. A choice. Still, Clara did not trust him. A kind voice could hide cruel intentions. A gentle promise could become a painful memory. That night, she sat inside the small home prepared for her, listening to the sounds outside. She expected footsteps approaching. She expected the moment when the stories became real. But hours passed. No one came. When she finally looked outside, she saw the warrior sitting alone near the fire, staring into the flames. Not drinking. Not celebrating. Just sitting there like a man carrying a burden too heavy for anyone else to see. For the first time, Clara wondered if the rumors had only told half the story. Maybe the most feared Apache warrior was not the monster everyone believed. Maybe he was a man hiding something far more complicated. A secret heart. Clara woke before sunrise, expecting to feel trapped. She expected regret. She expected the fear that had followed her across hundreds of miles to become reality. But when she opened her eyes, the small wooden room was quiet. The morning light entered through the window, painting golden lines across the floor. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She was no longer at her uncle's farm. She was no longer the girl who had been told what her future would be. She was now the wife of the most feared Apache warrior in the territory. The thought made her sit up quickly. Outside, voices moved through the camp. People were already beginning their day. Clara stepped outside carefully, unsure of how she would be received. She expected cold stares. Instead, several women greeted her politely. Some smiled. Others simply watched her with curiosity. She realized something strange. They were not afraid of her husband. They respected him. Throughout the morning, Clara watched the warrior from a distance. His name was Kale. That was the only name she had been given. No stories. No explanations. Just a name surrounded by fear. Kale moved through the camp like a quiet storm. Everyone noticed him, but no one disturbed him without reason. He helped repair a broken fence. He carried supplies for an elderly man. He stopped to speak gently with children who ran toward him. Clara watched in confusion. This was not the man described in the rumors. The people who feared him seemed to be the ones who had never met him. But there was still something intimidating about him. Kale rarely smiled. He rarely spoke. And when strangers entered the camp, his entire presence changed. His shoulders became tense. His eyes became sharp, watching every movement. Clara noticed that he was always prepared for danger. As if he expected it to arrive at any moment. Later that afternoon, Clara found him near the river, sharpening a knife. She stopped several feet away. "Do you always look like you are preparing for a battle?" she asked. Kale looked up. For a moment, surprise crossed his face. Perhaps he was not used to anyone questioning him. "No," he answered. Clara glanced at the knife. "It appears that way." A faint expression almost appeared on his face, not quite a smile, but something close. The world does not always warn you before it becomes dangerous. His words stayed with her. She wanted to ask what had happened to him. Why did a man who protected others seem like he was fighting invisible enemies? But she held back. Trust was not built in one day. That evening, a young boy from the camp fell while playing near the horses. Before anyone else could react, Kale rushed forward. The feared warrior everyone called Ruthless gently lifted the child and checked his injury. "Are you hurt?" Kale asked. The boy shook his head. "You scared me more than the fall did," he said. For the first time, Clara saw Kale truly smile. It was brief. Almost hidden. But it was real. She looked away quickly, surprised by the warmth she felt. She reminded herself not to be foolish. A few kind moments did not erase the stories. A few gentle actions did not change the fact that she had been brought here against her will. That night, Kale spoke to her outside their home. "You are free to leave if you wish." Clara turned toward him. The statement shocked her. "Leave?" "Yes." "You would allow that?" Kale looked toward the mountains. "I know what it feels like to have your choices taken away." His voice was quiet. For the first time, Clara heard pain behind his words. Not anger. Not bitterness. Pain. But before she could ask anything more, he walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers. Days passed. Clara slowly learned the rhythm of life in the camp. She learned that Cale ate last after making sure everyone else had enough. She learned that he carried the weight of leadership without asking for praise. She learned that the people who called him a monster knew nothing about the man standing beside them. But every time Clara began to see the kindness beneath his silence, another question appeared. What had made him this way? What had turned a gentle man into someone the entire frontier feared? And why did a warrior who could command armies look so lonely when no one was watching? Clara had arrived believing she was trapped with a dangerous man. Now she was beginning to wonder if the truth was far more complicated. Maybe she was not living with a monster. Maybe she was living with a wounded soul who had spent years hiding behind armor. And somehow, without realizing it, Clara was becoming determined to discover the man behind it. Clara had stopped counting the days since she arrived in the Apache camp. At first, every morning felt like another reminder that her life was no longer her own. She had believed she was sent away to become a prisoner of a man everyone feared. But slowly, something unexpected happened. She began to feel safe. Not completely. Not yet. Trust was not something Clara could give away easily. Too many people had made promises and broken them. Her uncle had promised to protect the family name, then traded her future for his own benefit. Others had spoken kindly to her only when they wanted something. But Cale was different. He never asked her to pretend. He never demanded affection. He never reminded her that she was his wife. Instead, he gave her space. And somehow, that made her think about him more than anything else. One evening, a heavy storm rolled across the mountains. The wind howled through the trees, and rain poured over the land. The entire camp moved quickly, securing supplies and protecting homes from the powerful storm. Clara tried to help. She carried blankets and supplies between the houses, refusing to stand aside while everyone else worked. But while crossing the muddy ground, her foot slipped. She fell hard. Pain shot through her ankle. Before she could push herself up, a strong hand reached toward her. "Cale. You should not be walking on that," he said. Clara looked up at him. "I can manage." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Not with anger. With concern." "You always say that." She was surprised. "You noticed?" Cale looked away. "I notice many things." Those simple words stayed with her. He lifted her carefully and carried her back to the shelter. Clara expected embarrassment. She expected him to treat her like someone helpless. Instead, he moved with patience, as if she were something precious rather than something fragile. Inside, he cleaned the injury and wrapped her ankle. His large hands, hands that had held weapons and faced enemies, were gentle. Clara watched him silently. "How did you learn to do that?" she finally asked. "Care for injuries." She nodded. Cale paused. "My mother taught me." The answer surprised her. She had expected a story about battles. Instead, she saw a glimpse of the man before the rumors. "You loved her," Clara said softly. Cale's expression changed. "Yes." The sadness in his voice was immediate. Clara realized she had touched a wound he rarely allowed anyone to see. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Cale looked at her. "For what?" "For asking." A quiet moment passed. Then he shook his head. "You did not do anything wrong." Those words were unusual coming from him. Because Cale was a man who carried blame for everything. Over the next few days, Clara noticed more pieces of his hidden heart. She saw him repairing toys for children who had lost their parents. She saw him leaving food outside the home of an elderly woman who was too proud to ask for help. She saw him sitting alone at night, staring at the stars as if searching for answers. The warrior everyone feared was not empty. He was carrying memories. One afternoon, Clara found Kale near the river. "You are always helping others," she said. "Who helps you?" The question caught him off guard. For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he answered. "No one." Clara felt a strange sadness. How can that be? Kale looked at the water. People see the warrior. They do not see the man. For the first time, Clara understood. His reputation was not only a shield against enemies. It was also a wall protecting his heart. "They are wrong about you," she said. Kale looked at her. "You believe them too?" Clara lowered her eyes. "Yes." A small silence followed. Then she continued. "But I was wrong." Something changed in his expression. Not a smile. Not happiness. Something deeper. Like those words meant more than she realized. That night, Clara sat beside the fire thinking about everything she had discovered. The man she feared had shown her kindness. The warrior everyone called heartless had shown compassion. The person she was forced to marry had given her the one thing nobody else had given her. A choice. But Clara also knew there was still a secret hidden beneath Kale's silence. A pain he refused to share. And she began to wonder. What had happened in his past that made him believe he did not deserve happiness? Because the more she saw his heart, the more she wanted to understand it. And somewhere deep inside, Clara realized something that frightened her more than the journey that brought her here. She was no longer afraid of Kale. She was afraid of losing him. For the first time in months, Clara woke up without fear. The mountains no longer looked like a prison. The Apache camp no longer felt like a place she had been sent against her will. It had become a place where people knew her name. Where children smiled when they saw her. Where the women taught her their traditions and laughed with her by the river. And where one man, the warrior she once feared, had quietly become the person she trusted most. Kale never spoke about love. He never made promises he could not keep. But Clara saw it in his actions. The way he always checked if she was warm during cold nights. The way he stood between her and danger without hesitation. The way his hardened expression softened whenever she laughed. Still, there was one thing that troubled her. Kale kept a part of himself hidden. Whenever the past was mentioned, his eyes became distant. Whenever someone asked about his old battles, he changed the subject. Clara knew every person carried scars. But Kale carried his like a secret he believed he had to protect everyone from. Then, one morning, everything changed. A group of riders appeared on the edge of the valley. The entire camp noticed immediately. The peaceful atmosphere disappeared. Warriors reached for their weapons. Women gathered children closer. Kale stepped forward, his face becoming the cold expression Clara had seen only once before. The warrior returned. Not the gentle man who repaired toys. Not the man who cared for the injured. The man the world feared. Clara watched as the riders approached. At the front was a man she recognized. Her uncle's son, William Whitmore. Her past had found her. William climbed down from his horse with a confident smile. "Clara," he called. "You need to come home." The words shocked her. Home. A place where she had been treated like a burden. A place where her future had been sold. Kale stepped beside her. "She is not a possession to be taken." William looked at him with disgust. "So the rumors are true. The savage thinks he can keep a civilized woman." Anger flashed in the eyes of those around them. But Kale remained still. Clara noticed something important. He was not afraid. But he was also not eager for violence. William continued. "Your uncle never approved of this arrangement. We made a mistake sending you here. You belong with your own people." Clara felt a familiar anger rise inside her. Own people. Where were they when she had no choice? Where were they when they signed her life away? But before she could answer, Cale spoke quietly. Clara decides her own path. William laughed. You expect me to believe she chose this? He looked around the camp. She was forced here. The words struck deeply because they were partly true. Clara had been forced into the marriage. But William did not know the rest. He did not know Cale had never forced her. He did not know the man standing beside her had offered freedom from the beginning. Cale turned toward Clara. His voice softened. Do not stay because of me. She looked at him. What? If you want to leave, I will not stop you. The camp became silent. Even William looked surprised. Cale continued. You came here without a choice. I will not become another person who takes that away from you. Clara stared at him. In that moment, she understood something. Cale's greatest strength was not his ability to fight. It was his ability to let go. He cared about her enough to release her. The thought hurt more than she expected. Because somewhere along the way, the man she was forced to marry had become the man she did not want to leave. William stepped closer. Clara, come with me. Everyone waited for her answer. Months ago, she would have obeyed. She would have lowered her head and accepted whatever future others chose. But she was not that woman anymore. She looked at Cale. The feared Apache warrior. The lonely man behind the legend. The person who gave her freedom when he had every reason to claim her. Then she looked back at William. No. The single word echoed through the valley. William's expression changed. Clara took a step closer to Cale. I am not going anywhere. A shocked silence followed. Cale looked at her, almost unable to believe what he heard. Because for the first time in his life, someone had chosen him. Not because of fear. Not because of duty. But because they truly wanted to stay. However, William was not ready to accept defeat. His hand moved toward his weapon. And Cale immediately stepped forward. The peaceful days were over. The past had returned. And this time, Clara would not be standing behind Cale. She would be standing beside him. The valley became completely silent. No birds. No voices. No movement. Everyone waited for what would happen next. William Whitmore stood frozen, his hand still near his weapon. He had expected fear. He had expected Clara to lower her eyes and follow him like she always had. He never expected her to stand beside the Apache warrior. But Clara was no longer the frightened young woman who had left her uncle's farm months ago. She had changed. And Cale had been the reason. Not because he controlled her. Not because he demanded anything from her. But because he had shown her something she had never been given before. Respect. William stared at her. You don't understand what you're doing, he said. Clara looked at him calmly. No. I understand perfectly. You are choosing him. She glanced at Cale. The warrior stood silently beside her, his expression unreadable. But Clara saw what others missed. She saw the fear hidden behind his calm. Cale was not afraid of William. He was afraid that she would leave. That was the secret behind his strength. The man everyone believed had no weakness had one. Her. Yes, Clara answered. William shook his head. He is a savage. The insult spread through the camp. The warriors around them became tense, but Cale lifted one hand, stopping them. Clara noticed. Even now, even when someone insulted him, he chose control over anger. She stepped forward. You call him a savage because you never tried to know him. William laughed bitterly. And you think you know him? Clara remembered the nights Cale sat alone by the fire. She remembered his gentle hands helping the injured. She remembered him giving food to others before himself. She remembered the words he spoke when he could have easily kept her. "You are free to leave." "Yes," she said. "I know enough." William looked around. "He took you from your home." Clara's expression hardened. "No. My own family took my choices away." The words shocked everyone. Even Cale looked at her. She continued. "You sent me away because I was inconvenient. You decided my future without asking what I wanted. You called it protection, but it was control." William had no answer. Because he knew she was right. For years, Clara had stayed quiet because she believed obedience was the only way to survive. But now she understood something. A person could survive without freedom. But they could never truly live. She turned toward Cale. "When I first arrived here, I was afraid of you." A sadness crossed his face. "I believed every terrible thing people said." The warrior lowered his eyes. "But I was wrong." Clara stepped closer. "You never treated me like property. You never forced me to stay. You gave me a choice when everyone else took mine away." A quiet emotion appeared in Cale's eyes. For a man who had faced battles, losses, and enemies, those words seemed to affect him more than any weapon ever could. William looked furious. "This is madness." "No," Clara replied. "This is my decision." The moment she said those words, something changed. The people watching no longer saw a woman who had been delivered to the camp. They saw a woman who had chosen where she belonged. Suddenly, one of William's men moved. He pulled his weapon and aimed toward Cale. But Clara noticed first. "Cale." Everything happened quickly. Cale turned. The warriors reacted. The attacker was stopped before he could cause harm. But the moment proved something important. Cale had been ready to protect everyone. Not just himself. Not just his people. Her. After the danger passed, William realized he had lost. Not because he had been defeated in battle. But because Clara had chosen another life. A life where she was respected. A life where she mattered. The riders eventually left the valley, carrying their anger and humiliation with them. When the camp became quiet again, Clara found Cale standing near the river. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Cale said softly, "You should not have risked yourself for me." Clara smiled faintly. "You did the same for me." He looked away. "I am used to protecting others." "And I am used to being protected," she replied. "But maybe it is time I stand beside someone instead of behind them." Cale looked at her. For the first time, Clara saw the walls around his heart begin to fall. "You truly want to stay?" She nodded. "Not because I have to." A pause. "Because I choose to." The words meant everything. Because Cale had spent his entire life being feared. Being judged. Being seen as a weapon instead of a man. But Clara saw him. The real him. And for the first time in many years, the warrior who had protected everyone else allowed someone to protect his heart. Still, Clara knew there was one final secret buried deep inside him. A secret connected to the pain he carried. And soon, she would learn the truth about the past that created the feared Apache warrior. The valley was peaceful again. The riders from Clara's past had disappeared beyond the mountains, and life in the Apache camp slowly returned to normal. But something had changed. Everyone had witnessed Clara's choice. She was no longer the woman who arrived frightened and uncertain. She was now someone who had earned the respect of the entire camp. And more importantly, she had earned something even harder to gain. Cale's trust. For days after the confrontation, Clara noticed a difference in him. He still woke before sunrise. He still trained with the warriors. He still carried the responsibility of protecting his people. But there was a small change. He smiled more. Not often. Not enough for most people to notice. But Clara noticed. She noticed everything about him now. The way he looked toward the children when they laughed. The way he listened carefully when the elders spoke. The way he stood quietly at the edge of the camp, carrying memories no one else could see. One evening, Clara found him sitting near the fire alone. The mountains behind him were painted with the colors of sunset. She sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then Cale finally said, "You should know the truth." Clara looked at him. "About what?" "About why people fear me." She remained silent, giving him the choice to continue. That was something Cale appreciated. She never forced him to open wounds that were not hers to touch. Years ago, Cale explained, he had been a different man. Not softer. But less guarded. He had believed people could be trusted. He had believed peace was possible. Then tragedy changed everything. His family had been taken from him during a violent attack between rival groups. The people responsible had seen him only as a warrior, not as a person with a heart and a family. After that day, Cale stopped allowing anyone close. He trained harder. Fought harder. Built a reputation that made enemies think twice. The world saw a dangerous warrior. But Cale had created that image because he believed fear was the only thing that could keep others safe. "I thought if people feared me," he said quietly, "they would stay away from those I loved." Clara looked at him with sadness. "But it also made you lonely." Cale stared into the flames. Yes. The honesty in that single word touched her deeply. The strongest man she had ever known had spent years pretending he needed no one. But he did. Everyone did. "You are not the man those stories describe," Clara whispered. Cale looked at her. "Maybe I was." "No," she replied. "Maybe you were a man who was hurt." The words reached somewhere deep inside him. Because Cale had spent years believing his pain was his identity. That the losses he suffered defined him. But Clara saw something different. She saw a man who survived. A man who chose kindness even after experiencing cruelty. A man who protected others even when he felt broken. Cale looked away. "I do not know how to be loved." Clara's heart tightened. The feared warrior. The man who had faced countless dangers. The man who never showed weakness. Was admitting the one thing he feared most. Not death. Not enemies. Love. Because love meant having something to lose. Clara gently placed her hand over his. "You do not have to earn it." Cale looked at their hands. "You choose me even knowing everything." She smiled. "I chose you because of everything." A long silence followed. Then, for the first time, Cale allowed himself to believe that maybe his past did not have to control his future. Maybe he could have a life beyond survival. Maybe he could finally stop fighting. Months passed. The woman who arrived as a frightened bride became an important part of the community. The warrior who was once feared became known differently. Not as a ruthless fighter. Not as a legend of violence. But as a protector. A leader. A man with a heart. Years later, people would still tell stories about the Apache warrior who everyone feared. But the truth was always different. They remembered his strength. They remembered his courage. But those who truly knew him remembered something more important. They remembered that beneath the scars, beneath the reputation, beneath the armor he carried for years, there was a heart that only needed someone brave enough to see it. And Clara Whitmore did. She was forced to marry the man everyone feared. But in the end, she discovered the greatest secret of all. The most dangerous warrior was never the monster people imagined. He was simply a lonely man waiting for someone to choose him.